Welcome to the Dr. Wyatt Marriage Podcast, where developing a long-lasting, happy relationship is the status symbol to achieve, and following my tools is one path to help get you there. I'm your host, Dr. Wyatt Fisher, a licensed psychologist specializing in couples therapy. If you have active resentments and you want help resolving your resentments, join my ER Marriage Intensive, which is my most comprehensive resource to help couples resolve their resentments and rekindle their love. To learn more, check out the link in the show notes or go to my website, drwyattfisher.com, and click on ER Marriage Intensive. So I just got back from a 12-day trip to Germany, and I went with my mom, my sister, and my niece. And we had a great time. The jet lag there and the jet lag back was pretty rough, but I've almost acclimated back, so I'm starting to feel more normal. But we had a great time. We stayed in Germany primarily the whole time, but one time we went to Lauterbrunnen, which is in Switzerland, and here's a quick story. My niece, who is 19, was driving the car. We had a rental, and we wanted to give her a chance to drive, and so she drove this day 3 hours from where we were staying on the Bodensee. So she's driving there. I'm in the backseat with my mom, and she got distracted for a split second by looking at the monitor, the screen on our car, because the roads were so twisty and turny that our navigation looked like spaghetti. So she looked at the navigation and said, "That looks like spaghetti." And right then she looked up as we were going around a corner, and this huge tour bus was coming right at us. And so she swerved to the right, and we missed that tour bus by about 6 inches. And all of us screamed in the car. And thankfully, she didn't swerve too far, or we would have gone off the cliff because we were going through the Alps. And so then she had to swerve it back. But that was definitely a moment of the trip I will never forget. And later we laughed about it, but in the moment we were not laughing. So had a great time. Glad I went. Glad to get back. And now I'm getting into the groove of the flow. So before I talk today about how I decrease conflicts in my marriage, there's a voicemail that came through. And so I want to play this voicemail and respond back to this listener. And then we'll get on with the episode today.
I am currently in a situation where I'm recovering from sexual addiction, pornography, multiple times a week. And but as of last year, 2024, we to really work on this. So we've been working for about a year and 2 months now on recovering from the betrayal from my end, and also helping him through the healing process. But I've noticed too that as I tried my hardest to be there through some of that healing journey, and so now I'm in this place of like I've given so much, and now I'm in this place of like my mental loaded. I'm wondering, do you have any recommendations on what it is that I have to work on?
Okay, so a few comments on this. First of all, pornography is a high-risk behavior for anybody because it's highly addictive. Research shows pornography lights up the same reward center in your brain as crack cocaine. It's highly addictive, and if you're high libido, what tends to happen is you're unsatisfied sexually in your marriage, and then you start outsourcing to porn. The more you outsource to porn, the more dissatisfied you are with your marriage, and it creates a vicious cycle. And like this lady is describing, when you're on the other side of finding out your partner has been looking at pornography, it can feel like a massive betrayal. And that creates a huge breach in your relationship. And so obviously there's a lot going on here. But for the husband, your goal is to get off pornography. Your goal is to become clean. It's an addiction. So your goal is to wean off of all forms of pornography so that your wife becomes your primary source of sexual fulfillment. Because when you're looking at pornography, it does objectify women. It does objectify the act of sex. And so then when you try to have sex with your partner, you're going to be much less sensitive, much less intimacy oriented, like she is describing. And that's what happens because it becomes much more about the act. It becomes much more about body parts and not about love, not about connection, not about intimacy. So your husband has to do his part with his journey with healing himself, and that's not your job. Your job is not to heal your husband. And your job is not to help him heal. His job is to work on his addiction and to get individual support to help him work through that addiction. And then his job is to rebuild your trust. It sounds like you've been working too hard. It sounds like you're a really sweet lady, you're really kind, and that you've been trying to support him too much in this journey. He needs to be supporting you. He needs to be catering to you. He needs to be working at rebuilding trust with you. And if you think about the wedding cake model I described, for a couple to have healthy sex on a regular basis, the very first tier of the pyramid is you have to resolve your resentments. Once that's going well, then you build up the friendship. When that's going well, then you reintegrate sensual activity like cuddling and sensual massage. And when that's going well, then you reintegrate sex into the relationship. So I just want to encourage you with that flow. So it's resolve resentments, rebuild the friendship, integrate sensual time, then we start integrating sexual contact. I would just encourage you to take care of yourself. You mentioned you hadn't worked out in a long time, you haven't exercised. Get back to what you need to recharge your batteries. Your self-care is a first step. Your rest, your exercise, community with your girlfriends. You may need to see an individual counselor for your own trauma response that you mentioned to this, and it's going to take time. Hopefully he is resolving his addiction, and then slowly you're going to have to work through the resentments you have toward him for having this addiction. And if he weans off that addiction and slowly rebuild your trust, then your marriage can eventually heal. So hope that was helpful. If you have more questions, you can email me. It's info@drwyattfisher.com. Okay, so I'm going to talk about how I decrease conflict in my marriage, and I'm going to talk about this by sharing two recent examples that happened in my marriage. So the one example is my wife and I were driving down the road, and normally when we drive, we talk and we connect and we chat and we dialogue about things. But this day was different. We were driving down the road, and instead of us talking, she pulled out her phone and started playing a game on her phone. And I thought maybe it would be brief, like she would just do it for a few moments and then she would stop, but she didn't. She kept playing a game for a while, and I even asked, I was like, oh, what are you doing on your phone? She's like, oh, I'm just playing this game. And that continued for the duration of our trip, which was about 10 minutes. And initially I thought, oh, maybe something's going on with her phone. Maybe there's something important. That's why I checked in with her. But when she said she was just playing a phone, then it started bothering me. Then it started frustrating me. Then it started hurting my feelings. Why was she choosing to play a game on her phone instead of connect with me? So what I chose to do in that moment was not say anything. Because if I would have said something in that moment, I was somewhat flooded. It would have came out sharp. It would have came out as an attack. It would have came out as a criticism. So I chose not to say anything on purpose. And instead I brought it up later in the day when we did the bullseye question. As a reminder, the bullseye is when you ask each other once a day, what's one thing I did right today? What's one thing I could have done better? Part of the self-discipline with the bullseye is you don't bring up complaints randomly in the day because they don't go well. That's a blind side. Your partner's going to get defensive. So I did not say anything, and I waited until we did the bullseye. Then when I did bring it up, I made sure that I didn't share my narrative, any negative interpretation that I was having. And I also made sure I didn't say the word you when I brought it up in the bullseye, because those two things make it harder for your partner to observe the ground rule of the bullseye, which is saying, thank you for the feedback. So when I did bring it up, she had asked me what's one thing she could have done better that day. I brought it up like this. I said, earlier in the day when we were driving in the car, instead of us connecting, there was a focus on playing a game, and that hurt my feelings. And that's all I said. And then she said, thank you for the feedback. And then she can decide, is that a fluke or is that something I do a lot? What's the kernel of truth in this feedback? That's up to her. That's her journey. That's what she can decide. By me handling it that way, it decreased conflict. I didn't mention it in the moment. I waited until we did the bullseye. And then when I did do the bullseye, I didn't share any negative intent and I did not say the word you. So try that. Try that with your partner this week. If they do something that hurts your feelings or that frustrates you, don't say anything in the moment. Wait till later when you do the bullseye. The second example of how I decreased conflict in my marriage is my wife and I started arguing one day about how to handle our teenage daughter's behavior. I wanted to set more boundaries for her behavior. My wife wanted to have more grace toward her behavior. And we started bickering about it. We started arguing about it. And what I noticed was I was slowly starting to critique her position and she was slowly starting to critique my position. And as I noticed that, I shifted the conversation toward bounce the ball. Bounce the ball is another tool that I teach to help couples share power and strike compromises. So instead of us debating which perspective is correct, my view or her view, I said to my wife, let's bounce the ball on this and strike a compromise between how you think we should handle it and how I think we should handle it, so we both have a voice. And that's what we did. We put our energy into meeting in the middle, striking a compromise to find a solution that would work for both of us. And we did. We found a solution that was in the middle between what my wife thought we should do and what I thought we should do. And that was very important because then we felt like a team. Then we fostered teamwork. Then we became a unified front. And then we presented that to our teenage daughter so that she knew mom and dad were on the same page. So that's another way you can decrease conflict in your marriage. The next time you notice you're butting heads with your partner, you're disagreeing on a decision, instead of arguing about it, instead of critiquing each other's position, pause and put your energy into how can we meet in the middle on this topic so that we're sharing power and striking a compromise. If you want to learn all my tools, I highly recommend you joining my Tools Marriage course. Tools is my most cost-effective resource I provide for couples. We meet live every week virtually, so you can join no matter where you live. To learn more, click the link in my show notes or go to my website, drwyattfisher.com, and click on Tools. Thank you for listening to the Dr. Wyatt Marriage Podcast. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to click the 5 stars and leave a review, and click that share button and share this episode with someone else you know in your life that could benefit from it. Also, if you have a question you want me to address on the podcast, leave a voicemail at 303-578-0618. And remember, your marriage is alive. If you care for it and nurture it, it will grow. If you deprive it and neglect it, it will wilt and die. The choice is up to you. Take care.